Oh, yes. This is the Hardcore Marketing Show. I'm Casey Cheshire, your host for this epic journey. And today's show, sponsored by Cheshire Impact, on a mission to help people maximize their use of Pardot and Salesforce. CheshireImpact.com. Bam. And we're live. And today's guest is back. Back from the past, back from the future. The first show was wildly popular, and I enjoyed our convo. And most importantly, he was just game for this crazy experience one more time. He's an author, a speaker. He is the conversion scientist. And if you've heard any of my webinars, you know I talk all about him and the learning lessons from our first podcast. He's also the managing partner of Conversion Sciences. Brian Massey, welcome back.
Yay.
Yeah, like nice flat affect yay from the crowd.
You need a clap track or something.
Do I need a noise track? Well, maybe we'll just put a little laugh track. No, we'll put an applause track in there.
Because there's lots of people listening, but it just feels so quiet.
Right. So quiet. We need to get some noise, get some whoops in here. Well, I gotta say, what's really cool about this is I dressed for the occasion. And for those of us joining us on video, or those on audio, you won't know, but maybe go check out the video this time. Brian, as the conversion scientist, you are in a lab coat. You're drinking coffee out of a beaker. So I decided to get a lab coat so that I would feel, appropriately dressed for this conversation.
Well, have I told you the research behind the lab coat? Why it's so effective?
Something about smarter. Tell me again.
So the area of study is called enclothed cognition. It's the study of the systematic influence of clothing on the wearer and those around the wearer. And they found out that when you put a lab coat on somebody and give them a cognitive test, they'll score about 17% higher on that test than if they're wearing street clothes. So when you put on the lab coat, you really think you're smarter than you are.
Right.
And they've also found that when someone's wearing a uniform, people will put more weight in their words, will believe what they say, are more likely to follow their directions. And so not only do you think you're smarter than you are, but the people around you think you're smarter than you are. And I like using science to get an unfair advantage and like that.
I think that's what this is all about today. I mean, this is it. This is the idea of using science, using experiments. So the theme of experimentation and science and how persona and personality and instincts fit into that. I think that's what we should talk about. We're going to geek out on topics like that and conversational marketing and testing and all those things. So, and tradition holds. Do you recall? Let me pass this back to you. You've held this before. This is Thor's hammer. So go ahead and take that and smash.
Am I worthy?
Oh, you are worthy, sir. You are worthy. Smash something. Marketing misconception, things that kind of are just driving you crazy these days. What's bugging you about bad marketing, and what's going wrong?
Well, the only bad marketing is the marketing that you do twice. So you keep doing keep doing the same thing over and over again, and you're going to get the same results. And so data is that space where there's a number of things. You don't have to play it safe anymore. You can actually try some different things, especially like this time of the year. A lot of marketing departments are behind on their goals, so they start doubling down, sending more emails, posting more ads. But the creative is safe. They don't want to take any chances. And people who are a little bit more apt to experiment will take a portion of their budget and try something different, something unique. And if they just have a few skills for trying things and understanding, so how big of a sample size can I really believe? How much do I need to spend to really understand if this ad's going to work or not? Right. The better they are at that, the more apt they are to do those sorts of things. And so instead of just throwing more money at the problem, throwing more traffic at the website, they can start throwing better traffic, higher converting traffic, et cetera.
Right. So really break out of the mold, right? Try something new, get creative.
Yeah. You don't even have to be crazy, but, on Friday afternoons, I tend my, the phone stops ringing and the appointments are scarce. People leave a little early. And so you catch your headspace expands and you
Right.
start to get these different ideas, better ideas. That's kind of my golden time of the week. But then by the time you get back to the office on Monday, you're like, I could never sell that. Well, go do an experiment and see if your crazy idea is that crazy or if it really could have an amazing impact on your brand, on your marketing. That's the beauty of experimenting.
Why don't more people do that?
I think that it is still somebody else's job. Every marketer wears a lot of hats.
Yep.
And there's something that they're comfortable with. So maybe they came up out of the design world. And so when they get that, 4:30, people are leaving, the meetings are over, put on the headphones and open Photoshop. Maybe they came out of the copywriting or English. They were a writer before they moved into marketing. So they put on the headphones and they open Word or whatever their favorite writing document is. Experimenters can do the same thing. We put on the headphones and we settle in and we open analytics, or we open our social media tracking, or we open our Facebook ads, or we open AdWords and go in and say, all right, I wonder what I've learned from all the money that I've spent this last month. So I think it's that thing that it has to be, they have to own it. I think they have to feel comfortable that they can experiment because we're all already wired for this. And they've got to give themselves some time and permission to go in and just be curious. It's an amazing,
Be curious.
it's a peak experience for me to go in and just satisfy some of my curiosity about what's going on.
Yeah, so much more so than just the status quo maintaining. And I think you said earlier, you're doubling down on the more bland, the safer content. Safer content typically gets deleted much faster than the weird, curious content. Just when we play it safe, it's not going to get better. Our results are not going to get better by tripling the emails we send to someone.
Yeah. Well, and I think that when you don't experiment, you begin to believe things like that your brand is fragile. So I can't send like one crazy email. Maybe I'm going to send an email that is like really personal. I'm going to use first person. I'm going to talk like a human being, and I'm going to make a joke.
Right.
Well, that's gonna turn off our business to business customers.
Yeah.
I think we way underestimate overestimate the fragility of our brands. If your brand is that fragile, then you've got a bigger problem than one or two emails.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
If you've got a platform where you can send it to a subset and get the data back and take that creative time, put on those headsets and go in and see what happened, you're going to start to say, wow, this is actually helping the brand. I've noticed, so I've, for about 6 months now, have been really emphasizing in my emails, click reply and talk to me, because every one of my emails will come into my inbox and I can reply to it. And it's been a really fun and interesting experience having people click and say, oh, thanks very much, and saw you at whatever show, and I love your content, and start conversations that way. So
click reply and talk to me. I like that. And now it's not scalable, but it's awesome engagement.
Yeah, but I mean, only if you're a giant brand does it become unmanageable.
True.
We've got 12,000 odd people on our list, and it's manageable for me.
How many replies do you get? Couple thousand? You just kind of stretch out and get settled down to
No. It's dozens. It's
okay.
It's a small number. So I think it's something that we don't do anymore. People don't like click reply because they assume so many of the mass emails that we get have no reply at. I mean, how ridiculous is that? No, yeah, we're sending you something to the inbox in a one-to-one email medium. The medium is one-to-one, even though this is a mass email, but we're not going to accept replies from you. I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, that triggers me like nothing else, is that reply all email. I want you to engage, but I want you to engage in this particular way. Follow my gilded path here and go to my landing page or click this thing and get this content, but don't reply and ask me a question.
Yeah.
Like, come on, people.
It's the new social media. You can reply to emails.
Right. Or did you know you can actually engage with people on Twitter, not just send out all your links to all your blog posts?
Yeah, I'm a little guilty of that myself.
Well, I think providing content is cool, but the thing that actually grows your account has always for me been engaging,
Yeah.
And when I'm thumbs up and liking and hearting and all the different iconing other people's cool articles and retweeting them, they're more likely to then take a notice to what I've got.
Yeah. Well, and how is Twitter working for you in terms of getting people back to the website and finding prospects? That's the bottom line.
Yeah. I think it really takes care and feeding. A couple of months ago, we really took an initiative to kind of get back to it and start actually putting some content out there, because the random and otherwise your feed becomes maybe a couple blog articles and then you complaining to Delta about your late flight, So I mean, it can be great for that, but if that's your whole feed is just complaining to corporate brands, like, come on, like there's no real value in that. But I still see the value in Twitter. I know it's kind of taken some heat, but also, it's not necessarily the in thing for some of the younger crowd, but I still, but in some ways it is, though. Very much in the business world, it tends to be that way that we can chat without bothering each other too much.
Yeah. We get, I think we get most of our response from Twitter, but we have our highest conversion rates from LinkedIn, even though it's much smaller.
In conversion rates off of organic or off of paid?
It's all organic. We aren't doing any. Man, it's expensive to advertise on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I was actually, there was a podcast this morning I was listening to. It was Jason Calacanis's podcast, and he was interviewing, I forget his name, but he was the director of demand gen at Calm, which is that meditation app. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's a meditation app on there's like 100 of them, but this one's pretty popular. It's called Calm. And so they have like a subscription type of thing where you can get some meditation. They're like guided meditations, which are really fun to make fun of. But then I've listened to a couple. They're kind of cool. They're just like, okay, focus on your breathing. Close your eyes. Here you are. There you are. Because sometimes telling someone to meditate is like, okay, what do I think about? I'm going to think about work. That doesn't help, So, but there's this app Calm, and so this guy was getting really detailed. Someone that it was like a little mini masterclass on demand gen, ad conversions, lifetime value, cost for acquisition, and this guy was just going through how he approaches it. And it was interesting. It was interesting. So I don't even know why I started talking about that, but whatever we were talking about.
Calacanis is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. How so?
I just like the way he looks at things. I like his contrarian attitude. He's I find him very interesting in his approach.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool. So, this point you were talking about earlier about, finding some time, for me, it's like getting in that flow state. I like that Friday idea. I think maybe we start a trend where, everyone else is kind of, I don't know, checking out on Friday. And, maybe you let that sort of task-driven side check out, but you do more of that experimentation on Friday. Maybe we call it Freaky Friday. I've never heard that movie before, but maybe we call it something like that where we just all we do that and we share our thoughts and our experiments on Twitter or something where we're just like, hey, this is experiment I'm thinking about, or this is what I'm thinking about. And we kind of all encourage each other. But like for marketers to do that on Friday would be kind of a cool thing.
We could have this mass peak experience.
Yeah.
Put on the headphones and open your favorite whatever app. That's actually a really interesting idea.
Yeah. And then maybe at the very beginning, you could scroll through some of the Freaky Friday marketing things that are happening and see what people, I'm testing this Facebook thing and I'm testing this conversion thing, or I'm going to brainstorm this stuff. And it kind of inspires you to then go and get in your own lab and test some things out.
I think that's a great idea.
We should do that. We should like send an email out and kind of like sponsor.
Yeah, I wonder if there's some sort of like if you could do it on like a Slack or something like that.
That would be cool. But then you got to get people to sign up for your Slack.
or a Twitter chat or something like
Yeah,
that.
like, maybe just a hashtag, you know?
But actually, though, doing something interactive like that kind of ruins the purpose of like just like getting into headspace.
Right.
Maybe, yeah.
Kind of like put it out there, then check out. You know, you can't do your brainstorming if you're still looking at Twitter 10 minutes later. It's like
Yeah.
turn off the social and put on the cool music and get going, get crazy. It's funny. Actually, I did that last night. Sometimes there's always this. Maybe we should talk about this too. There's always that idea of like you got to plan. You got to make plans to make plans of plans, and then you build the thing, and hopefully the experiment works. But last night I just had this interesting idea. There's a blog post I want to promote. I went on Facebook, and I hadn't worked with Facebook ads in a while, but I decided to do a little test. It was a $155 click test to drive some traffic and see what happens. Still running today, and it was just kind of fun. Small impact, but experiment, and even I learn and kind of catch up on how's Facebook doing it these days, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's we did it as that sort of thing as kids. It's like, what can I build today? What happens if I use this bucket in the sandbox and stack it on top? How tall can I make this? And we lose it in the pressure of our day-to-day jobs and our fear that our ideas won't be accepted by our teammates and our bosses. And we did a podcast with Dr. Diane Hamilton, and she's got a curiosity code index thing. Has she been on yours?
No, but we're about to, because I love that episode. By the way, so what is it, a numbered episode, or just look up? Maybe just throw out your podcast so people can.
It's intended consequences, and we can have a conversation about podcasting because we've gone back and forth as to whether to have the numbers, don't have the numbers. At some point, I think Apple was frowning on the numbers, but then everybody's like, "Well, if I want to tell somebody to watch episode number, you don't know what episode number it is." So,
the numbers, yeah,
yes. So right now we're in the middle of the question on that. But intended consequences, it'll be curiosity and creativity is the title of the podcast.
That's on Apple and all those places.
Apple and Stitcher and all of those other pod places.
Got
Google.
So you
I like the new Google
there.
podcast app.
Oh, you do? I'll have to check that out. Yeah, well, we should definitely talk about podcasts. But I want to bring it back to the reason you even brought up Diane in the first place was about it's almost like the element of being a kid. And as you mentioned that movie Big came to mind, and if you haven't seen this, you're out there, please go watch this as research for work. Just leave work early, watch this movie. But no, Tom Hanks goes back, he goes forward. He becomes an adult when he's really just a kid, and he's in this corporate setting. And I remember one of my favorite scenes is when they're presenting this new toy. He gets a job at a toy store for being silly. And the CEO is like, I'm silly too. And they kind of have a silly moment. So he's in this meeting, and they're like, well, the depth charts show this, and this is what our studies show, that it was a transformer type thing where it was a dinosaur that turns into a building, and he's picking it up and the arm falls off, and he's like, he raises his hand like a kid. Question, what's so fun about this? And they're like, whoa, well, clearly our research shows X, Y, and Z. But he was just a kid, not afraid to be incorrect or, be kind of dancing in the politics of the organization and just say, hey, this isn't fun. How about an insect? And then immediately everyone's like, whoa, an insect? An insect that turns into a robot? Oh my gosh, this is great. And then the people that pitched it in the first place were so furious. It was a good scene. It kind of reminds us to be like a kid.
Well, and that is exactly a situation where marketers need to be smart, because agencies or their paid search team or their research team are bringing them data. And if they don't have a little confidence around experimenting, they don't know how to value that data. So, research from focus groups, it's small sample size, it's people pretending to be your customers. It's the human brain wants to tell you what they think you want to hear because we're all social and nice people. And so focus group data is it's not reliable, but it is a data point that can guide you towards, okay, this is the direction we should go. These are the things we should test. Now, where can we find something more quantitative, larger sample size? Could we put this in front of some of our actual customers, a lot of our actual customers? The things that then make the data feel more believable, give you more confidence on it. And that's a part of the learning curve of experimentation, is understanding this relationship. But we already know. I think last time I was on, I told the story about my son, Sean, and he was trying to decide between two motherboards for this computer he was building, this really important computer.
Right.
And one was 4-star, one was 5-star, but he knew to go and check how many reviews were driving those ratings.
Yeah.
So he knew intuitively to check the sample size, although he would never use that language. We already know how to do this.
Chip off the old block right there.
I guess so. He might even be smarter than me. He's killing it.
Version 2.0.
Version 4.0.
4.0. Well, this is a good topic. I'm glad we sort of evolved into this. It's like, okay, let's experiment, but then using data. I wonder if, even just the word, data and focus groups and all these things come into play. Is that like something that we're not as clear on? You mentioned to be able to do this testing, you gotta own it, gotta be comfortable, have some confidence, understand you have your ideation, but then you also need that data side. What do you suggest? How do people get that confidence on the testing and the data and the numbers side?
So I think the biggest barrier is, number one, confidence that you don't have to be a data scientist or a PhD to do this.
Okay.
We give out lab coats to our customers and partners when they've demonstrated that they have earned their lab coat. And these are people who don't have a college. Yes. There's people that don't have a college degree. There are people who are Russian literature majors from all walks of life, and they can get it. So I think that's the first step, is accepting that you're able to do this. And then the second thing is, when you do experiment, a lot of experiments fail. Your great idea that you're sure was going to work doesn't pan out. And that kind of gives you you've got to be comfortable with that failure. You've got to be okay with like, I spent $155 and 2 hours of my time in the week, and turned out that wasn't a good idea. You've got to get comfortable with that and know that as you work through those, you're going to hit on those things that are like, whoa, now I'm a genius. I think that's the other thing that kills that experimenting. If you measure it in terms of the things that we're typically measured by, then it can shoot you down. So those are the main things.
So a lot of experiments can fail, just being aware of that. And it's okay in the science world. 99 different tries and number 100, gets you penicillin, or however many times they tried, and they looked at the orange in the fruit basket. It's okay in that realm. I think sometimes that politics enters into, if I'm wrong all the time, I need to have some wins, but the wins do come. I like what you said. It also matches what we said earlier. Just don't do it twice, right? Learn from, if it doesn't work, well, what part of that didn't work, and what can I take with me going forward? So that way it's a lesson. If this Facebook ad does nothing, I will have learned way more than $155. Actually, I made it per click, so they don't have any money yet, but I will have learned way more than that spend in terms of the advertising, the positioning, setting it up, the targeting. It's a great lesson learned anyways, but to your point, yeah, things will fail. Just don't do it twice, and learn from it each time. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, and when you do have successful experiments, there's nothing more impressive than like dropping into your weekly or your monthly report some of these graphs from analytics or heat maps from Crazy Egg. It's quite impressive, and everybody gets it. So
you're like, dang, you did that. Do it again.
From our brand research, that's one of the things that marks our clients, is that they're smart, and they want to be smart. They want to like align with those sorts of things. And so all I'm trying to do is show more marketers that they already are pretty smart.
Already are pretty smart. I like that.
Well, as a manager, do you want a team of safe marketers, or do you want a team that has a bunch of experimenters in it? Really, what do you want?
That's a great question.
It is a great question, and it's not. As a manager, I think you're going to have to learn how to manage experimenters, because if someone spends 2 hours and $1,000, and every week for 3 weeks, and there's like, oh, no winner, oh, no winner, oh, no winner. You have to like figure out, all right, is this okay? Right. So I think there's a set of skills there that maybe I should spend a few blogs talking about what I think are the skills, because I can't enunciate them clearly. It always comes back to get comfortable with failure.
It sounds a lot like baseball. I didn't play baseball growing up, well, on a team per se, but my son's doing a little softball. But yeah, the whole baseball thing, right? I mean, these people, if you look at batting averages, I mean, what's a good batting average? They're fractions, they're decimals, they're, it's not even a majority of the time. It's like, oh, majority of the time I get a hit. No, not really. But it's a greater than zero. And same thing with pitchers. No one's perfect, but more often than not, they're striking people out. So it's like, can I get that? You got to get that occasional home run. I mean, when they talk about like Babe Ruth and Big Papi in Boston and all those different people, I mean, it's the occasional home run that won the game that made that guy a star, not the fact that, the other 8 times he was at bat, he struck out like a noob.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting metaphor, because if you were a Cubs fan for decades, you could be sitting in the stand collecting box scores, and that's one of the things that baseball is known for, its data richness, and people track the box scores, they track the earned run average, they track the strikeouts per game, all of those things.
You're right.
But you're measuring it for a losing team, and it wasn't until more recently that the Moneyball, the book and the movie, where they said, why don't we take some of this data and start using it to decide who we should be recruiting? That is the distinction. Everyone who's in digital marketing has data sitting around. You've got analytics running under your website. If you're advertising, you've got AdWords, you got Facebook, you got Instagram. The data is there. You're just probably measuring a losing team. How do you take that data, spend a little headphone time with it, and say, like, wait a minute, there's a trend here. These things are correlated. I wonder if it's causal. Let's go in and find out.
And by the way, that reminds me, I have a buddy of mine, Zach Pines, if you met him, but he calls himself the Moneyball marketer.
Oh, yeah? Smart.
Cool term. And the alliteration, you get bonus points for that. MM.
Ding, ding, ding.
But tell me about the causation, the correlation, because I know it's like it's an important concept you're supposed to hear about in school, but I don't think.
Well, let me give you an example. So if you're running a catalog e-commerce site, you can set up Google Analytics to track site search. So What are people typing into your site search? And if you look at the segment of people that do site search, and you compare their conversion rates to the number of people that don't do site search, or to the site average, which includes both people that do and don't,
right,
we typically find a 2 to 3x improvement in conversion rate and average order value for people who do search.
Okay.
So that's correlation. So the hypothesis becomes, well, if we can get more people to search, then that'll raise our conversion rates.
Right.
But the question is, do people who search buy more, or do people who are ready to buy search more?
Right.
So we don't know if the search bar is the cause, or if it's just an effect that I know what I want, I know what I'm looking for, I'm ready to buy. So search is the quickest way to get there. So as experimenters, we spend a lot of time, number one, finding these correlations, and then seeing if we can use that correlation as a cause and effect sort of a thing.
Right.
And with some of our customers, we'll run a test that'll test causality, get more people to search and see if we see that same conversion rate. And sometimes we see a cause, and sometimes we don't. So not all audiences are the same.
Right.
So some we still look at, and some we still test.
Right. That's a really helpful example. And it makes sense too. Okay, so when a search is a part of your journey, then you're most likely to buy. But we're not sure if that was like just an indicator that, to your point, people that are searching were more likely to buy anyways, or that the act of searching encouraged them to buy and it was helpful. So did you then drive a bunch of people to try to get more searches and then see if that?
Yeah,
how do you test that?
our playbook calls for, if we see like a 3x effect, it calls for using, for instance, we did a timed overlay. If somebody's on a page and not interacting for a while, we'll pop up a search box. And then the other thing is make the search box bigger, bring it down more closer to the main navigation. Sometimes the search is way off in the corner. Right. So anything that will make it more visible and get more people to use search. And then we do a comparison of, typically we'll do an A/B test to see if the higher search volumes actually result in higher conversion rates and more revenue. Revenue per visit is typically what we track.
Do you recall what the case was in this situation?
So I think the general rule is this. The question is, how important is discoverability in this particular case? So one of our clients was Tygon, and they're like Etsy. So they're a website of stores. They're a site of stores. So discoverability was really a big thing because, you wanted to go and find out if they had shoes or if they had salsa, or there was a wide variety of things that were offered on that site. And so in that case, whenever we made search more evident, put it in front of more people, it definitely drove a higher revenue per visit. On apparel sites and stuff, we have had less. Discoverability doesn't seem to be as important. People are more browsing. I think there's more browsing behavior than finding specific categories of things or specific shops.
Got it.
That's our current hypothesis.
Got it. So you make a hypothesis and test it out, but don't just assume that part was the cause. This kind of ties into a lot of the work we've been doing lately in marketing automation and CRM. It's getting into that multi-touch attribution modeling. The idea of, initially, in my favorite is first touch. Like, at least if I can tell for the most part where I think I got you from with the best accuracy I can possibly get, then I can go back to that particular area and probably get more people like you to acquire them, or to come become customers. But then that multi-touch, like midway through our sales relationship, you attended this webinar, or you, read this white paper. So the people that read this white paper are more likely to become customers. Is that because they read the white paper, or were they just better buyers who are more likely to buy anyways, and so they actually were reading your content?
Yeah. Well, and so attribution is thorny, and I'll be honest with you, we don't spend a lot of time with attribution because you can spend a whole lot of time and only get incrementally better at understanding those things.
Sure.
What we prefer to do is take the funnel apart. So first thing you want to do is make sure that you have measurement all the way through. That's actually a bigger problem than how many visits, how many touches, which pieces of content, which pieces of where people interacted with you. That's more important, and that's the biggest missing thing. Is we often don't have visibility all the way through to the CRM to get an idea of how things are being closed. But a better question for us is, we'll look at a piece of content like the webinar, let's say, and we will ask how valuable was that? In other words, did that particular thing drive a large amount of traffic? Right. Revenue, lead generation, whatever you're optimizing for. if you find things that are either underperforming or performing really well, those are both opportunities for optimization.
Right.
Something that's really performing well, you can often find additional results from that by optimizing it. So we tend to look at the pieces as a part of the funnel, and also we tend to have specific paths for specific things. So there's a little bit less, like a homepage. Traffic can come from anywhere. Attribution's a nightmare.
Right.
But it's just the way people enter you. So that's a situation where you've just got to really pull it apart. But ads to landing pages, people taking a step, get their email address, get them to buy something inexpensive, get them to buy again, and then reduce your churn. Those sorts of things, we can take a little bit more piecemeal.
I like that. What I got from that was understand the final result, be able to connect that full process together. Did it turn into a win? Can you see that this thing did actually end up buying from start to finish first? And it makes a lot of sense to me. And then zoom in on different areas and optimize almost like locally, like go local and try to optimize a particular part of that process, or a particular asset, a particular webinar, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, the more your attribution model grows, the smaller the slices you have to optimize. And from an A/B testing standpoint, the sample sizes get too small to really do that. So,
right.
It's one of the disadvantages of A/B testing. But there are other ways to test.
Do you think everyone has the ability to test, or everyone, we're talking about personality, and I know we talked to Colby last time, which is more of an instincts type test. Do you think some people, if they're not really hip on testing, that's cool? Or is just people haven't been given the opportunity to do that?
Yeah. I think it's as like to my earlier analogy, I think that there are certain people that are drawn to design, drawn to writing. And I think there are personalities that are more easily drawn towards data. But the problem is that every marketer is writing, every marketer is designing.
True.
Because we wear so many hats.
True.
If they're not doing the design work, they are reviewing and approving and modifying. So it's just another thing marketers have to do. And I would argue it's every bit as rewarding and creative as design and writing, and project management's even pretty creative. So
yeah, the rewarding part, that's a really good point. I think sometimes the challenge for me was before we were able to connect to revenue at the back end, I didn't know if I was having any effect. All I knew was activity metrics, and it was like, okay, well, I sent 1 million emails out, but what did that even do? But now we start seeing some ROI. You got these leads from this event and they turned into all this business. That's fantastic. It's great seeing that. It's a little slower, but what an interesting point. I'm just like the aha moment was it can be fun, like a small reward instead of some big feast. It might be a little piece of candy here to be able to say, I just learned something, or I just saw something happen. And you kind of get a little bit of that feedback loop that where normally marketing, we're so big picture, sales gets that immediate high of go hit the gong, you close this deal, even if it was like a 6-month deal, you have that understanding. Sometimes when we're in the lab and if we don't have a defined test, we're just constantly trying to iterate, but if you have those wins, it can kind of mark the occasion.
Yeah. It's, the question is, where do you get your dopamine squirts?
Yeah.
Like, for a project manager, crossing something off a lift gives a little reward. Going in and writing an amazing headline, and it is absolutely the same with data. And for me, it is addicting because I'm always interested in going in and, all right, what am I missing here? What could be causing this?
Right.
Any correlations I'm not aware of. So
I can see you going into your office with floor to ceiling books and sitting back in a high back leather chair with like a brandy and going like, why are these results happening the way they're happening? Kind of like sort of sifting it around in the glass and being like, I know it.
You have a good imagination.
Like Dr. House. You're like the Dr. House of the marketing world.
Yeah, hopefully I'm not quite as
A
abrasive,
little
but
nicer.
that's exactly it. It's like,
nicer.
all right, here's an idea. Go run the test. Here's an idea. Go run the test.
Yeah.
That's all he's doing is failing 6 or 7 times until he gets to the end and is like, I'm so smart because I figured it out.
Yeah.
It took you 10 failures.
It could be an infection. Go test for that. Nope, not an infection. All right. I mean, the whole if he just immediately guessed it, the show would be over in 5 minutes.
Exactly.
There'd be no drama.
It's the same with data. There is drama in data. That's a great analogy. I'm going to go watch that show a little bit more.
You should. And if next show we chat together, you have a limp and a cane, I'm going to go, But one thing that I do find fun and exhilarating when in that kind of space is writing with dry erase markers on windows. Like he did that, or he'd be like standing on some random, the shelf of a conference room writing on a window. How cool is that? Your backdrop is the outside world as opposed to some, opaque dry erase board in the office.
Have you tried it though?
Yeah, you can't see
Everything's unreadable.
You can't read anything, but it feels so cool.
It's actually the worst place to write anything.
But it feels like you're breaking the rules, though. So someone in housekeeping is like, what's going on?
Should I erase this?
Yeah, right. Should I? You
Do not wash window.
You don't even know. Yeah, drawing on windows. So, all right. So let's get into podcasts. I think you had mentioned earlier you're doing some research and people that see you. What was that? People that see you, just they buy from you, or those that see you present?
Oh yeah. So our like 60% of our long-term customers that have been with us for like 3 years, came into the fold after seeing me present.
Wow.
And I mean, I present somewhere between 12 and 20 times a year. So it's not like I'm out on the road all the time. The sad part is that they contact me a year to 18 months on average after they saw me speak.
Oh,
so it is a long lead time sort of a thing. And we're like, all right, so how do we maximize this? There's apparently something about seeing me in person that builds trust. And then that bodes well and they stay with us long enough for us to really build a partnership. And our thought was, well, maybe we can use the podcast to do that.
Right.
And, I love to do podcasts like this, but we thought, well, why don't we accelerate that? Maybe this is a more scalable way to do presentations. And hopefully if more people are hearing it, it won't have this 18-month lead time before they reach out and call.
Or it does, but get more of them. So yeah.
Yeah. But I have a long view. And so I'm fine with that if that's what it takes. So we invested in intended consequences and, so much of our blog has become SEO oriented that I'm glad I've got this new creative outlet where I can have fun, have interesting conversations. I always write and record a specific intro where I get to just do whatever I want. There's no SEO saying, "Whoa, what concept are you going after? Is this competing with our other pages?"
Keyword.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that I like, and we're right at 6 months. It is a long-term investment, so we'll just have to see. The thing that I hate the most about podcasting is how unmeasurable it is. No feedback. There's no we don't have the analytics of podcasting in the podcast players. There's no way to get that data back. We can get plays out of Apple.
Right.
So it's for that segment of people, but
like you get downloads, but you don't necessarily know how long they went.
Exactly. And, a podcast player will download
the whole thing,
all the episodes, every time they come out and just they get listened to, they get.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. You're right. Like if you subscribe an Apple and it's going to auto download,
it's going to just download.
They may not have listened. Oh no, that you're shattering my world. That's a good point.
So glad I could do that for you.
I don't have 4 listeners. It really is just my dad and his app downloading automatically every time on his 3 laptops.
Yeah, but I mean, it's got to get downloaded before it's listened to. So
True.
it's a feasible proxy
Right.
for listens. So, if there was a way to do a correlation, I would tell you, yeah, we did a correlation of downloads to listens. And now there is there's a new site called Chartable, which is trying to do a better job of giving us data, but it's just the limitation of the medium. So
Isn't that
that's
still just
what I hate
downloads
most.
too?
It is downloads, but they also it is downloads. They do a little prefix on the URL, so I
Right.
think they're getting some insight into listens as well.
Right. Okay. Listens as well.
And they have a really nice URL shortener attached to data. So as you share on social media, you can see how many people are opening that MP3 file.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I'd seen Chartable, and I think we're gonna probably set it up. But it kind of aggregates all your data. Our podcast. Where are you hosting it at?
We're at Libsyn.
Libsyn. Okay. I'm using Podbean.
There's something. All of the podcast hosts seem to be like still using their 1990s designs.
Yeah.
I don't know what the deal is. They're focused on the back end. I guess that makes sense.
Well, they're still all like overseas, I think. Overseas productions, I think.
Oh, are they really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So you need some mainstream Palo Alto funded podcast hosting platform. I guess Anchor might fit that. I don't know if you heard of Anchor.
I haven't heard of Anchor. I've used Blueberry for my previous podcast, which was just a read the article podcast.
Okay.
But that actually grew pretty quickly. I might do some episodes. I might experiment with some episodes where I'm just reading some of my best content into the microphone, because I listen to 10 books on audio for every one that I read on paper. So
me too. And sometimes I'll just re-listen to some of my favorite books on audio just because it puts me back in that world if it's fiction, or the narration is great and you just want to hear that again. And you've got a great voice for narration.
Why, thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So one thing I wanted to tell you about, there's you should check out, there's a awesome combo I had with Michael Greenberg a couple episodes ago, and he is so far beyond me in the podcast world. Like, I'm geeking out on it. I love it. But in terms of using it for content creation, and the whole show is called Don't Do a Blog, Do a Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Start with a podcast and then use that content and then repurpose it all. And you can go from an hour-long conversation into many mini articles, as well as I think he said if you have an hour or 50 minutes, you can actually do like a mini book, like a booklet, or an ebook is what he said. So there's all these different things where you can just repurpose that whole conversation, get it transcribed, and then get it out on social, get it out on all the blogs and all those other kind of places. And you didn't have to like create it from scratch and start from the editing side.
Yeah, I think that the Trents and the Transcribe Me of the world, what's the other one? Rev, I guess. Rev, is that right? Yeah. I think they're missing out because they're like, all right, here's your transcription. That'll be $80 for an hour or something like that.
It's cheaper now.
Some of them, yeah, I think it is getting cheaper.
Yeah.
But, Trent's going to a subscription model. That's fine. But if I could, it's, my choices are, I can get this as a Word doc or RTF or text. Why couldn't I click to podcasts? Why couldn't I click? I would like this as a slide share. So if I uploaded a webinar,
right,
a slide share with audio over it, or just there's a number of different things you could do. I would like this as an ebook.
Mm-hmm.
I think that these transcription services are just missing the boat. So
right. And, Michael brought up that while they're missing the boat, they are actually empowering everyone else to do those same kind of services, because when transcription was a human or was really expensive, it was cost prohibitive. But now it literally is like $6 or $5 for an hour because of.
So how are they making money? I mean, gosh, no one wants to be in that business.
It just does its thing. And so, it's quantity.
Well, if you're a content agency, I think that this should be your thing, is because it fixes the problem of the content creator in your agency understanding the business that they're creating for.
Right.
Just send me the webinar, send me the podcast. I'll listen to it. I will understand. And, transcriptions it takes a lot of time and a lot of work to get a transcription to readable format. But
sure.
So, I mean, but those are the, $1,000 projects. If I could reliably pay $500 for an ebook for every one of my podcasts, it's kind of a no-brainer, because that makes all of my pages
do that
converting. Yes.
How many pages for your ebook do you want?
So I've got a 30-minute podcast. It's probably going to be more of a report summary. Okay. But, a good content company will go and find relevant images to drop in there.
So $500?
I would do $500 for a webinar, so that you would have some graphics. That's what I think. Going from a webinar to an ebook, a webinar to a series of blog posts, a webinar to 12 social media posts, featuring a landing page, and do my landing page as well. Do my landing page for the ebook, then write my blog posts or my social media posts that are going to drive people to that landing page.
Right.
Build my list. That's the $2,500 deal right there.
Yeah.
If it's a big enough audience out there, we look to get subscribers right now. I think we get them for $4 or $5 right now.
Okay.
And we'll take those all day and night. So
because they get on that thought process or your thought leadership starts trucking in, and then they eventually hear you speak on a podcast and maybe sign up.
Yeah. Well, once they get on my list, then I've got a constant flow of content and stuff to keep them educated and interested.
How's the podcast going? How's it been?
So it's growing great. And we are syndicating it on Webmaster Radio.
Okay.
Actually taking that content over to Landing Page Optimization is the name of the show on Webmaster Radio. And that already had a following. Tim Ash founded that.
Tim,
yeah. So he gave me permission to take over that feed. So,
wow.
But Webmaster Radio is even worse. So they have this homegrown. Their system is made for live broadcasts. Like you get on and you have your 3:00 on Wednesdays show and you do it. And so that's what their system was built around. Podcasting is kind of an afterthought for them. So we have even less data on that. But
got it. I did a webinar 2 days ago, and I encourage people to ask questions on it. So it's not just that really boring. I do video on it so you can see my crazy face, and just trying to make it very lively, very much different than a boring class at school, a boring webinar, corporate, right? Just trying to mix it up. My style, and it makes it more fun for me. And I'm just like, hey, please engage, ask questions, say things. And one of the questions people asked in the chat and in the middle of the webinar was, is this a recording?
Oh, no kidding.
And I was like, what was his name? I don't know, but I'm like, no, Fred, this is live. How you doing? You have a question? Ask it. Thanks for coming. He's like, oh, okay, it's live.
Well, and that whole art around getting people to take an action at the end of the webinar is that is an art. So you're like, all right, everybody who's interested in moving forward with this, hang on. The rest of you guys can go.
Right.
And it creates this this social joining effect where you're like, oh, I'm a part of the people who are staying on. And so people are more likely to take advantage of whatever offer you have.
Oh, that's interesting.
There's a whole science to it, but webinars are very effective. The hardest part right now is in our market. So we deal with the marketers. They see a lot of webinars.
Yeah.
They put on webinars.
Yeah.
So the attendance rates I've seen go from, I was averaging about 50% a few years ago to 20%, 10%. So much so that I haven't done a webinar in over a year now.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine have been that way. I mean, 93 signups and then 30 attendees, and I get it. Things get in the way. But yeah, it's much different.
Yeah.
Much
And you
different.
can argue that, well, at least you got their contact information. But on the webinar, again, human voice and teaching them something, giving something of
Yes.
value, and then being able to bring them to make a decision at the end that's really what you want.
Right. Right. So, I mean, the podcast is, other than the visual, I mean, we have the visual here, but most people are listening to this. But other than the visual, podcasts you can still do a lot of those things you just mentioned, the different kind of things you want from a webinar. Teach people.
Yeah, I think the culture of podcast is a little bit different, or at least that's what
Oh,
my
tell me.
podcasting agency is. They're like, we don't want to be promotional. We really want to be. Podcasting is not a lead generation medium by any stretch of the imagination. I do a little bit at the end of my podcast. It's like, all right, when you get back to the office, assuming that they're listening to it, commuting into the
Yeah.
office or driving around, go do these things. And so hopefully it tweaks them to think about me when they sit down at their desk, but it's not a lead generation medium. It really is trust building, credibility building, and that's why it's long form. But still, you want to know what audience how big that audience is growing.
Right.
Ours is doing well just from organic. We haven't been advertising it or anything like that, other than jumping onto the best
Sure.
podcasts.
Other podcasts, I think that helps. And I would say some of the values I've seen from the podcast or these kind of connections, like me getting to not only learn from you, but get to know you. So if we're ever at conversion conference together or something, we're like, hey, like we've legitimately chatted for almost 3 hours, directly. That you kind of get to know people that way. Whereas, normally we don't really have that much time having a conversation with someone. So there's that. I don't call it network, but that's sort of like connections that you can get, and the learning that you can get, the content you can create out of it. I have one friend that he's created this podcast, and he interviews heads of machine shops, and it ties into what his business does and whatnot. And he was telling me, this is fantastic. It doesn't even matter if anyone's listening. This is amazing. I'm learning. I get to work with these machine shops. They get to, they get to be on a show, and so he's just all about it. It's just such a different world. Whereas some of my B2C friends, they need people to be on it because they want to drive people to that shopping cart to make that purchase. And if they're not, then what's the point of it? Whereas on the B2B side, you're right. It's a different, if you get all salesy, people are like, what is that? Like, I don't want to hear an infomercial. I want to hear a conversation and people joking about things with each other and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a segment of the marketplace that it's effective for. And this experiment is really for me to understand what segment of my market this medium is going to be effective for.
Feedback's hard too, though, right? Like, I don't know if you've heard from people that listen to it.
I haven't. So
right?
in 6 months, I don't have any anecdote other than people that are close to the business and feel like they should listen to it and are close enough to that they can give me some feedback. Haven't yet heard anybody say, yeah, I was calling to ask about your services. I heard your podcast. So
right.
I'm waiting for a few of those anecdotal things. As experimenters, like, we know that that's not conclusive data, but it is pointing in the right direction. It's one data point that we can use amongst the other things. And so this is a very, this is one of those experiments that you would normally say, oh, it's too much work, it's too much expense. But the experiment happens along with all these secondary benefits, which is, as I said, I get to be more creative. I've got more frequency on my blog because every one of my podcasts generates a blog post. And just really thinking through, how I talk and think about the marketing message, which I love this podcast, this one and the previous interview for that very reason.
Right.
This experiment has to have more of these ancillary values than just what the bottom.
Right. Otherwise, if you're just going off of, just straight numbers, it would be hard to justify in the normal sense. Probably just like it was when people were doing traditional marketing and they were trying to get digital and justify that. Though quickly digital caught up and was like, here's 1,000 stats you don't get from a billboard. And took over. So it'd be great for podcasts to catch up in that regard as well. And start, sharing some more stats, almost like the YouTube type stats. YouTube will tell you how much was watched, maybe not to the person, but it'll give you more of that trending data. Are people actually watching the whole thing, or what are they doing in terms of that podcast?
Yeah, if there was a player out there, and I'm welcome, if any of the listeners want to send me an email, it's brian@conversionsciences.com. I answer my email. Is there a player out there that provides data? And if so, I will, on every podcast, promote that player and so that at least some segment of my audience I'm getting data on. So that's where we need it, is in the players.
For sure. And what's fascinating is that, Podbean and some of these other, several people actually listening, 400 people are listening, 400,000 people are listening, 4 million people are listening on the Podbean app. And I would expect the Podbean app to give me way more stats than whatever they get passed through Apple, because it's their own app. So come on, Podbean, give me more data. Let's go. And then I'll promote your app as opposed to just allow people to go on Stitcher, go on these other places. And
it's the hosting platforms that seem to be providing the data, but all they know is how many downloads.
Right.
So Blueberry has a fairly good package. Libsyn has a good package, but it stops at the download. The Chartable is attempting to get verified plays.
Huh.
So that's the piece of the puzzle that I'm interested in. They also track 7-day downloads and 30-day downloads, so you can see who's getting it like right after it launches, and that's a good indicator for people who are subscribed, probably.
Right.
So anyways, I'm just now starting to explore that sort of data. Hopefully they have an API and I can pull it into a spreadsheet and geek out.
Right. Hey, honestly, if it's fun though, too, I think you mentioned the freedom to be able to create and not be restricted by your normal, playbook of SEO and making sure things are optimized. If it's fun, I think that drives a lot of it. For me, I knew that I needed to create content, but at the same time, this is a friggin' blast. So if I could do this all day, every day, I'm pretty sure I would. So it works out nicely in that regard, at least. And then you hope that the trailing indicators doesn't catch up to the amount of fun that you're having and kind of balance it out.
What have we not covered so far? This has been a fairly wide-ranging conversation.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I kind of like that too, because on the second time, I already know you. Like, I've asked you your life story, and so it's almost more of just like two marketers in lab coats sitting down, chatting about what. By the way, this is fun to kind of flip it to the side and put my hand in my pocket, like I'm.
Makes you look like McDreamy.
Yes, here I am, doctor. But I like the freedom of these too, and we can kind of just go off and just explore and actually have that even more unscripted conversation. So I think the one thing that we haven't necessarily chatted about yet was just what's exciting you lately, and maybe that was already answered by the podcast that's happening now. But I don't know if there's anything else that is exciting you, and I'll share one of the things that is kind of crazy with me too.
I think. So I started writing about conversion optimization in 2006 on my blog.
Wow.
And I
wasn't even born yet at that point.
You look great, man.
I do. I age well.
Back, closer to the turn of the century. And, we built this business on early adopters. And I think we're starting to see more mature, not mature is not the right word. We're seeing the mature market come in, like where people are like, okay, we've been talking about this. It's part of the budget, a little more traditional rather than, we were getting contrarians and like, all right, you're going to come in here and you're going to throw things around and use data to prove me right and all that stuff. Now it's there's a lot more people building conversion into their marketing plans, and so for me, that's pretty exciting. And I was just
saying, do you like that, or do you kind of miss the rebellious youth that were your original customers?
That's a great question, because culturally, we are really still kind of set up for that that contrarian sort of approach. But as we add people and as we bring in more less contrarian customers, I think that's going to shape our culture. But that's a great question. Culture is everything we enjoy, and I think our longest lived clients are those that are more like that. That brought us in, that are contrarian, that are the ones trying to do new things, and we just have to see how the mature market looks for us.
It's that temptation, when you grow up the food chain, the bigger and bigger companies that maybe get more and more serious, and then not always, but sometimes you get those larger ones, and then you're just like, how do you become that? You don't want to be that large agency, that doesn't really have a soul. You want to kind of keep it loose and real, but you still need to be able to speak to those customers. But it sounds like that kind of culture you have is what enabled people to earn those lab coats and to be creative and think outside the box.
Yeah, I think we design it where teaching is a big part of it. So that's what the lab coat symbolizes, and I think that's why we have so many clients that have been with us for 3, 4, and 5 years.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Because we're teaching them something every week when we're on the phone with them.
And you keep finding wins for them every week?
We don't find wins every week.
Oh, okay.
We sometimes don't find wins every month. I mean, that's one of the first things that we have to teach our clients is like, we're going to say failure is good because we've learned something, but ultimately we are searching for those wins. And in the first 6 months that we're with someone, we've got to find enough to make the numbers work out. After that, they work as we become more of a partner, and we're helping. You mentioned billboards. We had a client that was like, hey, we're putting up billboards. Can you give us some data that would tell us which of these billboard designs is going to be most memorable? And we're like, yes, we can do that. So we were able to give them some feedback on that.
So would you do like some display ads with the same pictures, or?
Oh, no, we just did a usability hub study. It's called a 5-second test.
Huh.
So, you bring a panel of 25 people to look at one, and you're like, they see it for 5 seconds, then you ask them a few questions. So what was the brand?
Wow.
What do you think this company did? What was the offer? So it simulates what you would have on the freeway. And what would you do if you wanted to take action when you got, afterwards? And so we could see if one outperformed the other. In this particular test, both designs performed about the same.
So in that regard, you're like, well, they're both the same. I guess you don't really have an answer for them, or you just say the answer is they're.
No, we go back and say you can go with either one. I knew it, and I said you should try something more different. Like you want a bigger difference between.
God, they're like very much copies of the same almost. And
they were similar enough that I didn't think there was going to be an effect there, but. They said, well, these are what we have, so try these two things.
Well, that's okay. At least, one of them internally probably had the political backing to it, so I'm sure they were happy to hear that ad didn't lose in the...
Yeah. But that's what as a partner, they come to us with all of their data questions. And so it becomes more about having a team that can answer these questions and less about how much money did you make me this month? Although we never lose sight of that.
Huh. Very much like a brain trust then, as opposed to that more standard services agency delivery where you just need to crank out some to do. You're really thinking for them.
Yeah, there are two broad categories of problems in businesses marketing on the marketing side. And that is you're either tool rich, where you've bought all these tools but no one's using them, or you're people rich, where you've got the data scientists but you don't have the processes in place for them to turn what they know, what they're learning, into stuff the rest of the organization can use. And so we bring that. We're very focused on actionable results, and we're going to make those tools. You're going to get so much value out of the tools you've invested in. Wow. So I didn't mean for this to become a commercial. It's certainly not what it is. But
no worries. No, I usually do that. I get to turn it into a commercial by just because I get curious. I'm like, no, tell me more about this, and it's okay. It's all good.
Yeah. But as an experimenter, that's another part of your value. It's like, well, we've invested in Adobe Analytics, or we have Google Analytics, and we've spent all this money setting it up, and we've got Crazy Egg, and I'm going to go and I'm going to make these tools deliver better results for us.
Right. Right. And then not jump to the wrong conclusions and cost yourself more money.
Well, yeah, you get to make some mistakes. That's
True.
okay.
That's
It's
true.
part of the learning curve.
You get to fail. Cool, man. Well, I was going to share one of the things that I'm excited about is the conversational marketing realm. And that's the term, the buzz term that's created, but really it's around chat. And there's a company called Drift out there.
Yep.
It's gotten pretty popular because their marketing is wild and crazy. Again, like stand out and be wild and crazy. And they basically made a fancy chat bot with some AI. But then that's one of the challenges that's happened with this sort of conversation. It's just, putting chat on your website for B2B. The challenge, though, is that you end up getting a lot of noise because you don't want to actually talk to everyone on the site that wants to talk to you. And so I was being able to connect with a company called Qualified. And I think they're out of the California area. Some really cool guys to run that. And their thought is, no. They have this cool quote. Let's see. It goes something like, sales reps can't scale and bots can't sell. Right? So like humans can't scale and bots can't sell. So somewhere in between those two is this intersection where you have the humans who can't scale and the bots who can't sell, and people need to do what they're best at. The bot is best at the scaling, but if you want someone to actually sell something, they need a human and not some AI bot that sounds cheesy. No one actually wants to talk to a bot, right? And so, but they use the bot to actually qualify someone. And what I'm really excited about, because in the Pardot and marketing automation world, is that the Qualified actually plugs into Pardot, plugs into Salesforce.
Oh, I see. So they're using the AI just to then send certain number of people into the human.
Yeah.
And does the human just like appear? It's like, hi, now you're talking to a human because you're
from the get-go. Well, I guess two parts. By tying into Salesforce and Pardot and some other things like Clearbit and some other data providers, if you can already tell, or if they came from, like one example is if they come from G2 Crowd and they're comparison shopping, that's a big lead source for you. You automatically ping the appropriate salesperson for that region, territory, location and all that. And they're like, hey,
so they're doing IP lookup.
All that. And so the goal is to get the human, only the qualified conversation. And not the noise of like, here's 30 people who are going to ignore you and you don't actually want to talk to. But for that one that is actually that perfect ICP, that fit that you've been looking for, you can make yourself available. They may chat, they may not want to chat, but if they do, you're like a real human. You're not like, I'm a bot. And the other thing is they can hit a button and you can actually have a phone call right there through the website or chat. And eventually you'll be able to do a demo. And you can actually see what they're looking at, scrolling, and where their mouse is, all the while you're.
What's the name of the?
It's called Qualified.
Qualified. It's great. What do they have? Qualified.io or something?
I think it's just qualified.com.
Is it spelled KWAL?
No.
I'm always.
I don't know how they got the word, but yeah, it's just the word QUALIFIED.
I'm always interested in how the scarcity of domain names is causing company naming
to go crazy,
to change. Yeah.
Yeah.
In our playbook, there are a couple things. Number one, having chat on the site can often generate credibility.
Sure.
So just having it on the site can improve credibility, and that can positively affect your conversion rates. And I think most people are using chatbots really as lead generators. So it's like, hey, you have a question? I'm here to answer.
Yeah.
And you type in the question, the AI goes, give us your email address. And so it can be a nice target for that to improve, to add people to your list. And ideally you're following up with folks. I mean, if you're making that sort of a promise, but, so those are the first two things that we look for when we're testing that sort of thing. And then, of course, if you can use a smart and intelligent way of pre-qualifying people and getting them to the right people to sales, that's a win. So
right, huh? Yeah. I mean, I'm excited about it because I've tried both. I've tried just opening up the world and just trying to chat with everyone, and then you're just busy and you're not really focused. And especially if you think about sales being the one manning that channel, you don't want to distract them, because if they get kind of like bad leads, if they get a bunch of bad leads, they're like, okay, this channel's bogus, I'm not going there anymore. And they're the ones that's supposed to be like there and responding. So it's important to give them only the ones that they want to talk to.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of going backwards. So people moved to the web so that they could sell things on the web without, at a low cost of sales. You didn't have to have a salesperson involved, a store and all that stuff. Now we're kind of going backwards and saying, well, we want to add more of that human touch. And so we're starting to add chatbots, which requires more of the human touch. And so it's kind of an interesting trend, but, I think really what your brand positioning is, like ours is very personal. I answer my emails, I answer my phone. So, maybe we have tested chatbots for our business, and it didn't work for us. But
chatbots or actual chat?
It was actual chat. We just started testing the bots just to see how many people would interact with it.
Right.
And it was small. So we didn't even turn on the communication piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah. They're starting to call it in the B2B side. They're starting to call it, it's like the missing link. What happens after a lead's created? Because what they're kind of getting at too with this, maybe it's spin, but I get where they're going with it, which is, so much of marketing automation is like, talk to you later, like complete this form and we'll talk to you later. But if they complete this form and they're exactly who you want to talk to, why would you want to talk to them later? Maybe they want to talk right now. And so there's a little bit of that, the mixture of, why are we sending a drip every week and every month and, playing this slow game if some people are doing the Netflix binging and they want to know now some of this information.
I think it's brilliant. And, the best time to ask somebody to do something is exactly after they've done something.
100%. Yeah.
Cialdini calls it liking. We like you more. We give you more respect because of the fact that we chose you, and we would never choose a loser. Right. So that's why we love, thank you page questions, thank you page surveys. Ask, on the thank you page or your receipt page, ask what almost kept you from buying today. You'd be amazed. You'll have a very high response rate, and you will be amazed at what you learn about what you're doing wrong. Lots of people will get through your purchase process, no matter how screwed up it is. But then if you can find out what almost kept them, you can start to understand what's actually driving people away.
Wow. I think that's it. I think we end there. I mean, mic drop. I don't know if you looked at the clock, but time flies when we get to chit-chatting.
What time is it? Oh, we've been talking a while.
Yeah. So how about
so
we throw some URLs, where people can connect if they haven't heard the previous, where LinkedIn, Twitter, obviously.
Well, I want everybody to come over and listen to intendedpodcast.com.
Yep.
For the Intended Consequences podcast. It's on all of your apps. Go check it out.
What do you got coming up? What kind of interviews have you had and
coming up? Actually, I'm talking with Lance Loveday with Closed Loop, and I actually have one where I am just interviewing a line marketer, someone who is like, I think many of the listeners to this, she just wears all the hats, and I said, I'm just going to talk to like the guy on the street sort of a thing and have a whole podcast discussion about what's in the way, what keeps people from experimenting, how you deal with it.
Cool.
And it was actually from that podcast that I really had this realization of this headphone time. So I think a lot of people will relate to that because they'll hear themselves in that.
Excellent. What episode or who is that? Or
that one actually has not been published yet, so that'll be coming out in July.
Okay, so if we subscribe now, we'll be on the receiving end when that comes out.
Yeah, if you're listening to this in August, it's out. Go check it out.
Yeah,
intendedpodcast.com.
Whenever you listen to this, it might already be out.
Yeah. So that, and of course, come and read all of the content, our podcasts and content also available at conversionsciences.com. And screw social media. Send me an email, brian@conversionsciences.com.
I like that.
You don't have to put that in the show notes, though, so the spam monsters will get it.
Well, there you go. And you know what? I'm Casey at Cheshire Impact. So, boom. There it is. Love it.
Two guys in the lab coats aren't afraid to talk directly to you.
That's right. And what did we say? We said you are Dr. Bunsen Honeydew. And I get to be Beaker. Beaker.
Boop, 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 boop. I don't think he actually talks.
Listening to the Muppets here today. If you've learned something, I know you have, share this with someone. I literally have pages of notes over here. I've been learning, so hopefully you've heard some things. Share this with people. Be a thought leader in your circles, on your LinkedIn, and get this information out there. But for everyone else, this has been the Hardcore Marketing Show. We will catch you all next time.